solemn of this, let's just go to the Lord. We are humbled to just be able to sing these words, God, that you are sovereign over us, you're sovereign over this moment, and all that you want to do in and through us today. We recognize and we celebrate your perfect love that's over us today. And God, I know you have a will to accomplish some things in our space and in our midst today. And so, God, I pray as we open your word, as we look into it, may it wash over us, may it cleanse us, may it cause us to look more like your incredible Son and our Savior, Jesus. So we commit this to you, God. We love you. This is for you. You're worthy of it. In Jesus' name. And everybody says, amen. You may be seated, church. My name's Cody. I get to be the family pastor here. Welcome. We are so thankful that you have joined to worship all together today. Those of you who are online, thank you so much that you are there. I actually got to communicate with a few from the last service or online. There's a lot of people who are kind of away or traveling, and we're so thankful for that opportunity and for those who take full advantage of that as well. And this wasn't on the plans for me to be up here today, but I say that so that I can ask you guys to pray for Pastor Kurt. He's not feeling well. And Miss Cindy is bride as well, so both of them kind of under the weather. I just pray that God will get them back. I know he wanted to be able to be in this spot. I know his heart, and so I'm sorry that he's not able to do that, but he called in the lefty, and so here we go. We ready, church? We're still going to swing for the fence today. It's going to be fantastic, all right? Yeah, come on. We love you, Kurt. I'm sure he's watching. Get to feeling better, bro. And can I just also honor this praise band? I mean, I didn't know Ashley could even play the piano, and like, what? Come on. Man. I walked in and like they were practicing this morning, I saw her on the keys, and I'm like, is she faking that right now? Like how that's happening? So man, so we're so blessed with the people that God has gifted, that they would use their gifts and talents and abilities for him, for sure. So I wanted to be able to start today. If you have your Bible, you can turn to Luke 15. Turn to Luke 15, and as you're turning there, anybody love a good movie? I mean, there's something about movies that are just incredible, like the stories where you can just see yourself in them. You can find yourself in the story. You kind of identify with a character. It's just something about stories, right? When somebody can tell a good story. And I have one that I want to be able to share with you, a personal story of mine. And to be honest with you, I might be just using you guys for a little bit of therapy, if that's okay. As I share this story, I just need to bring it out. I need to just kind of let it out as often as I have an opportunity. So this is therapeutic for me. So there's this time. And ultimately, I just kind of want to connect with you. I want us to kind of be on the same page. No, I'm just not alone in this space. And so I was in middle school. This goes way back. These roots are deep, y'all. So I was in middle school, and we used to do this thing where we would go and school clothes shopping, and I despised it. It was terrible. I mean, I guess because I was growing and I was changing a lot, my mom would want me to try on like 20 pairs of pants. Anybody else with me trying on clothes was the worst? Anybody? Yes, come on. And when your parents are like, do it, and you're just like, oh, this is going to take all day. Yeah, that's kind of how you feel about it. So this one particular time we were trying on clothes, and I have an older brother, so he was also trying on clothes. And so he went first, tried on, finally got done, and it was my turn. And so here my mom loads me up with all the things that I need to take into this little tiny cubicle. And so I walk in, and I just need you to hear me say, and just get on board with me, that I was in there for maybe 10 seconds. All right? Y'all believe me. I hope that you do. All right, so we're on the same page. I'm in there for at least, long enough to figure out where do I put all of this stuff down. And so close the door, find a place to put it all down, and when I closed the door, I noticed that behind the door, it was extremely wet. I was like, ugh, what is going on? Like, that's not right. That's maybe even gross. And so I opened the door back up. I was like, hey, Mom, 10 seconds. 10 seconds, remember that. I don't know what's going on. It's wet in here. I think maybe you should come check that out. So she comes in, and with just a little bit of investigation, we find out that somebody thought that cubicle should be used as a restroom. I know, right? It's disgusting. 10 seconds. Did I mention that I'd only been in there for 10 seconds? So I come out and I'm like, well, I didn't do it. So all signs pointed to my brother. Yeah. He quickly was like, Mom, I am old enough to know better. That was your youngest son. He's like, your number 2 did the number 1 in there. That's on him. And I was like, are you serious? And so this story has now been forever known as the story of 3 whoopings. Because my mom got so upset with me in that space thinking that I did this in 10 seconds. How was it? It wasn't even possible. There was way too much over there. I was like, definitely wasn't me. So she spanked me in the store. And then on the way home in the car, she got to thinking about it again, and I was getting one of these while she's driving where she's reaching around the seat, and I'm trying to dodge it with my legs. All right, here, I'm sharing this because I believe there's some parents that identify with whatever's going on now, and there's some kids in here that identify that, like, come on, anybody with me? Like, you see yourself in this story a little bit. And then when I got home, she told my dad, 3 whoopings. You believe that? They can never take those back, right? I got those. I received that, and it was terrible. And many years later, I'm married. We had a family gathering to where we were eating. I think it was like a Christmas or Easter time. We're just all together having this like great meal, feasting, and my brother just starts laughing. He's like, hey, y'all remember that time we went and changed and like trying on clothes? Yeah, I did that. It's like, 10 seconds, Mom. Told you. Impossible for me to do. No, all right. So I tell you a silly story, right? Therapeutic. Thank you for being, guinea pigs for me. And if you're a counselor in the room, I need help, and you identified it, please help me out after the service. It'd be great. But I share that with you because I believe that the God who made us knew that we would identify with storytelling. There's just something innately in us that we would identify with characters and with things like details within a story that would actually speak to us, because it's exactly what Jesus did. He was a master storyteller. Right? Any word that was going to come out of his mouth in the details of these stories were very uniquely designed for the audience that was in front of him, because he knew what they stood in need of, and he knew the words that he would need to speak the truth that they needed to hear over them. So as we go into Luke 15, this whole chapter is him telling 3 stories. He just starts cranking out stories, right? So 3 in a row. And so before we jump into that, there was the first one that he talks about is the story of the lost sheep. And the second one that's like lesser known is the lost coin. It was a woman who had 10 coins. She lost one, and like she searched frantically and finally found it, and threw a party after she found it. And so the one lost sheep, they threw a party after they found the one lost sheep. And so then he turns, and you guys can probably finish this by title. All right, the third one, this is called the prodigal son. Right, so the prodigal son. Now, I think it's important for us to realize that was a term that we've added to it. Jesus never said the term prodigal. Right, so it's just actually, it's a teaching point, and it is one of the main teaching points of this story that he was telling, but I think we might rob ourselves a little bit if we only are focused on a singular person in the story, right? So 2 things that I think that are important. So when Jesus tell them, these were parables. So let me define that for you. A parable is a story that had a spiritual meaning or application behind it. There was something underneath the story that when he's sharing it, hey, there's something else for you to hear in this story. There's more to it. And also, when we put the word prodigal on it, let me define this word for you as well. It means actually, because we kind of have the idea like this, it means to go wayward. And that's actually inaccurate. The right way to understand the word prodigal is having or giving something on a lavish scale. Having or giving something on a lavish scale. So the prodigal son who had his wealth that was given to him, he just spent it lavishly. That's why he was prodigal, not because he was wayward, but because of what he did with what he had, that he was prodigal. Right? So how he spent and what he did with his life made it be understood that he was a prodigal son. But I think there's a better term for this. This actually should be the prodigal parable. Because everything in this story, there's the older son that's in this story, that we're going to get to look at him and looking at the father as well. Two people who are also prodigals. It wasn't just the younger son, but the older son who was extremely self-righteous, and so we'll get to dive into that a little bit, but he was lavish in his religious ways, right? He was lavish in laws and restrictions. So in that, and also, Tim Keller wrote a book called The Prodigal God, and it's kind of based off of this. And the idea is that there's a God who loves you like crazy. In spite of anything that you can ever do, he still loves you. And actually, in that way, he lavishes love on you as a prodigal God. So help us to turn our thinking and our understanding just a little bit about what it means to be a prodigal. So as we jump into, I want to look at first the setting of the stage. All right, so what's happening? Because Jesus was extremely, extremely intentional. So I want you to look at Luke 15, 1 and 2. And then I'm going to give you this. Here's a phrase. Here's an equalizing phrase to get us all on the same page. All right, here's an equalizing phrase that would get us all on the same page. Whether you are brand new at this Jesus guy, maybe you barely know him, or you don't know. Remember a moment in your life where you didn't know him. Like you've just been following and seeking the Lord your entire life, and maybe you don't know him at all. No matter where you're at in this room today, there's one thing that unifies us. God is bigger than you think that he is. Come on. This is true, and it's important that we all understand that, because it's easy for us to be guilty of being in a space to coming like this and just believing that there's not more for us, especially when we go into a passage that you've heard so many times. But I assure you, there's either salvation that's in need for somebody in here today, or there's sanctification in need for somebody in here today. That where we would look and draw closer because of who he is, there's more for you in him today. So I would encourage you, as we go through this story, that he's actually speaking this to a crowd intentionally because he wants them to have a growing view of the Father. Because Jesus was about the Father's business. He said it multiple times. I'm here and I'm about my Father's business. And so he wants you and me to have a growing view of God. I know this is like a long runway for us to take the plane off, but I think these precursors are really important. We have an incredible family ministry team. All right? Yeah, come on. Monica, right here, who leads our children's department. So if we only ever taught some of the truths that we are teaching in kids ministry, though, or in preschool ministry, right? Don't you know now, if your understanding of God didn't grow beyond that, right? Because you have adult-sized problems, and adult-sized problems with a preschool God is not going to work out for you, right? Right? We need to also make sure that our understanding of God is also growing with us. We give our kids what they stand in need of to know God, so they have a foundation for that to be able to continue to grow. And it doesn't stop, because he's bigger than you think that he is, and there's more for you and for me. And so today, as we tell this story, I want you to think about where you land in this story. Just like whether you're the parent that's swatting the kid, or you're the kid, or wherever it is at. Just identify yourself as we go into the story. So Luke 15, 1 and 2 says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to him." He's setting the stage. So here's a group of people. The tax collectors and sinners are over here, right? And then the Pharisees and the scribes were also there. So they're over here. All right, so tax collectors and sinners, Pharisees and scribes. He knows there's two different groups of people in front of him. So this is a tailor-made story, a tailor-made parable just for them. All right? Because he didn't mix any words. Every word out of his mouth was about to be extremely, extremely intentional. So let's move to verse number 11. And this is Jesus, and he said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. If that's all you knew of the story right now, who would you think that this story is actually about? It's the man. Because he gives details. It was the man who had 2 sons. And see, we focus a lot on the son and not as much on the man. But this story is about a man who had 2 sons. So if you're hearing this story for the first time, if you're in the audience at this moment, you believe like, okay, I recognize this is the story that's more about the man. And so they did. And then he says, and the younger of the sons said to his father, Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me. Oh, okay, church, you have to understand that if you were there in this moment, there would have been a gasp in the audience, because this would have been unheard of. That this younger son would have asked. There was the Pharisees and scribes would have been wondering, oh, what are you going to do with that son? Because you realize what he's saying. If somebody is going to receive their inheritance, what is coming to them, what has to happen? The father has to die. So he's in essence saying, hey, Dad, I wished you were dead. Give me what's coming to me. That is ridiculous. In fact, by Jewish law, he actually could have lost his life for a comment like that to his father. And so he knew it. So what kind of boldness that he would have to go to the father. But then what does the father do? It says he just gives him, he divides the property and gives it to them. I was like, it's incredible that he's already teaching this group over here who thinks that they have God all figured out and thinks that they're good and they're living a good life, which is maybe a lot of us in this room, right? We just feel like we're good and we're living a good life, but they are learning something right now about the Father. They are learning something right now. Jesus is teaching them something right now, is God actually allows you to reject him. He allows it. He doesn't want it. It's not the Father's heart, as we will see, but he allowed his son to just be able to pretend like he was dead, which is rough. And you and I have an option to be able to live life as if he doesn't exist. But then we see kind of what happens if we do that. So he decides to do that. The father, which to this side of the room, right, was blown away by it. This side of the room was like, ooh, there's tax collectors and sinners are like, I like this father. I could get away with something maybe, right? Because you see what he's doing? Because that younger group is the tax collectors and sinners is the younger son, right? The tax collectors and sinners, it's the younger son, and they're identifying as the younger son. Like, oh, if I could just go and ask my father, maybe I could have a little something, right? Moving on. It says, not many days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and took a journey to the far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and he hired himself out to one of the servants in that country, who sent him into the fields to feed pigs. A Jewish boy feeding pigs. That ain't kosher, y'all. Hopefully some of y'all got that, all right? And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate from. And no one gave him anything, but come on, verse number 17. Says, in this moment, he came to himself. He had an aha moment. Listen, I hope that it doesn't take for you to find your rock bottom at something like this, because this was a very low place for this young man. He was low. I mean, he found himself doing something that he shouldn't have been doing, right? That was against everything in his core. It's where he found himself. But then he recognized, wait a minute, my dad's hired servants have more than enough bread, and I'm going to be here, I'm going to perish with hunger. Like I'm going to rise and go to my father. I'm going to say to him, Father, have you ever gotten in trouble? And you just start thinking about, all right, how can I spin this story to make it sound good? Because that's what he's doing. He's practicing his story before he gets home to dad. Didn't work for me. 10 seconds, Dad. Didn't work. But he was practicing his story to get to where when I get to my dad, I know I can't be his son anymore, but I can be employed. I can be employed by him because he could take care of me even if I have to serve him and work for him. I can at least be better off than I am right here. I can go back to the Father. So it said, then he arose and he came to his father. It's verse number 20. And while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, felt compassion for him, and ran and embraced him, and he kissed him. And the son said to him, he started launching into the story that he had practiced. And he said, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father stops him. As he's in the middle of saying, he says to one of his servants, like, quickly, grab the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his hand. Put shoes on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Get out the QB rub. We're about to have a party. Celebrate good times. Come on. That's what he did. That's how the father responded to the son when he came back. And I'm going to ask you, or recognize that he didn't have to be fixed. Nothing else had to happen for the party to start. Because he had already said it 2 other times as he's told these other stories. As he told the story of the lost sheep, he said when the one was found, there was a celebration that happened. When the coin was lost and it was finally found, there was a celebration that happened. When the son that was lost came back and was found, there was a celebration that happened. He's trying to get a point across. That when lost people come and are found, or when people who are wayward come back to the Father, there's going to be a party. And he doesn't waste any time. He didn't tell him to do all of these things because here, if you're still thinking about the story that he's telling, that these scribes and these Pharisees would have been, here's your moment. He came back. You let him get away with it once, but when he comes back, what are you going to do? Come on, Father. Well, he's still expanding their view of the love of the Father. Because they're probably thinking, at best, we might can have a party over here, but you're going to sit and watch. Wouldn't that be kind of maybe how we would respond to him? Like, you're going to pay for all of that because you just squandered all of your inheritance. You've put a bad name on this family. Like, anybody else? Like, that seems like it's rational thinking, doesn't it? Not the love of the Father. I mean, how long you think before the celebration took place? How long between him groveling, saying, I'm no longer worthy to be your son, before from that moment to the time that he was like telling the DJ his favorite song and was on the dance floor and singing? How long? Maybe, 30 minutes? Maybe an hour? He had long enough to clean up and put some new clothes on. He's looking clean, and here he is. He's able to then party and celebrate. He just pulled his seat up to the table and was like, what is this? He knew he didn't deserve it, but there was a celebration on his behalf. And then the story turns, but there's something for, maybe you identify yourself before we go to the other son. Maybe you are finding yourself that maybe you're outside the boundary lines that the Father has set for you, and you found that maybe it didn't work out like you thought it would. Maybe that's you. Because that's exactly what the younger son found out. That, hey, the Father has really good boundary lines for me. Actually, Psalm, I think it's 16, 6 says, like, your lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Right? The boundary lines of the Father. Like, who thinks about this? Only people who have recognized that when you know the love of the Father, that he knows better for you, your ways are better. Right? Your way is better. Your thoughts are higher than my thoughts. Your ways are better than my ways. Like, when we submit to that, then we realize that actually being inside the boundary works out pretty well. You can choose to be outside the boundaries. Right? Think about driving down the road. First you hear one of those. It's like your warning sign. Like, oh, maybe you need to straighten it up a little bit, buddy. You fell asleep there. But you can continue if you choose, right? It's an option. But the further you go, the worse it's going to be. You get outside the boundaries, it's going to lead to what you didn't intend for it to lead to. And especially when we recognize the boundaries that the Lord has set for us. Right? These restrictions, they feel like restrictions that would stop us, but in fact, they enable us to have freedoms to keep the things that we need to be away from in this world away. Right? And so knowing that the Father's ways are better. So you can't, here you go, you can't escape the love of the Father. You can't escape. I mean, the younger one thought that he had. He thought that he had fallen out of love from the Father. And so but he learned you can't escape. And I'm telling you, as people hearers of this story, you too, you can't escape the love of the Father over you. It doesn't matter where you've been. It doesn't matter. Take one step back and there's gonna be a party for you. All of heaven, it says. He wants you to hear it. He needs you to hear it. Come back. Just repent from that. You got to step away from the thing and focus on the Father, and He's going to celebrate with you. And then to the other son. So now there's the older son who's in the field, and recognize, again, this is the Pharisees and the scribes, that group. So the older son in the field, and he came and he drew near to the house, and he heard the music and the dancing. He could hear the celebration. And he called to one of the servants and he asked, what do these things mean? What does this mean? And they said to him, your brother's come home. All right, and your father, he killed the fatted calf for him. Put some QB rub on it. It's a party, y'all. All right, because he was received back safe and sound. And verse number 28 says, but he was angry. He was angry and he refused to go in. But just like the father did with the younger son, who, when he saw him from a long way off, he came out to him. He does it for the older son too. He comes out to him. Doesn't leave him out there to kind of have to figure it out by himself, but he comes and he gives him this invitation to come in. Come. All right, so it says that the father came out and entreated him, and he answers his father, look, for many years I have served you, and I've never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me even a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. Right? He's like, all right, you've never done any of this for me. But here, I want you to catch this phrase. But when this son of yours, just like the younger son had disassociated himself from the father, so had the older son. He was no longer his brother, and that was no longer his dad. This son of yours. See it? He had removed himself as if that wasn't even his father anymore. So this son of yours came, and he devours your property with prostitutes, and you killed a fatted calf for him? And he said to him, son, you were always with me, and all that is mine is yours. And that's actually quite literal, because the inheritance of the other son is already gone. Everything that's left was his. Everything that's mine now is yours. It is fitting then to celebrate and to be glad. For this, your brother was dead, and he is alive. What was lost has been found. I would say to you two things. Make sure you understand. You can't escape the love of the Father, but you also cannot earn the love of the Father. Look, what moves God is His love for you, not your love for Him. Understand that we believe that what this older son believed, the things that I do, it causes you, I deserve this from you. That's what he's saying. I've earned this, and you've given me nothing. And so he's entitled to it as if he's done enough to earn his father's love. And that's just not true, because the love of God is a gift, it's not a reward. The love that the Father has for both groups is a gift to both of them. They didn't earn it. They didn't do anything to make it greater or lesser. Actually, I have a couple minutes to be able to add. I couldn't add this in last message, but there's this place in Matthew 4:23 where Jesus is going, and it says this. It says, he went throughout all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and affliction among the people. Can you imagine the nurses and the doctors in that? Who were there was like, man, we're bored. Jesus has healed every disease. Every person is afflicted. They're good. Everybody's fine in this town right here that he had come in. And so, what a boring day at the hospital. Right? Maybe great, but I need you to think about what's happening when he does this. He has forethought, right? God knows things before they are happening. So he's healing people. Think about it. The hands that he healed, he knew it would be hands that would go and do things that they shouldn't do, that would hurt people. I mean, if you and I were those people and you knew that was going to happen, be like, just not going to heal your hands, bro. I'm going to keep you from doing that because I'm going to save somebody else from you. That's how we would think, isn't it? That's interesting, right? But that's not how the Father loves his people. In fact, he knew all, because he had foreknowledge, he had future. He can look, listen to me, church. The love of God can look past your past. He can oversee your past, but he also loves you in spite of your future. Come on, that preaches right there. It doesn't even matter what you're going to do beyond today. It's not going to affect the love that the Father has for you. It doesn't matter. You can't earn it. It's not going to be greater. It's not going to be lesser. In fact, I like to think about John 3:16. John 3:16. For God, what's the next little bitty tiny word? So. I don't know if we can say that that's a measurement for love, but it is at least somewhat of an expression. I love you so much, right? I used to play football in high school. I know you can't quite tell anymore, but I did, right? And my dad was ridiculous, right? So I've already kind of messed with my mom, and they're probably going to watch this, so I love you guys. But my dad, he was ridiculous. He was louder than all the stands, all the cheers, all the music that would play, all of the coaches yelling, all of the noise of a play. I could still hear my dad over all of it. Man, he was just loud. He was yelling for things for me to do or not to do. He was telling the ref things that they should do and not do. He was telling the other team things. And I'm like, come on. And did I mention my dad was the pastor of our church? I was like, he's yelling things at the ref, and the ref was a deacon at the church. I'm like, come on, Dad, shut your mouth. This is not good, right? What I had decided in that moment was the parent that I wasn't going to be. I was like, that's ridiculous. And then I have a son. And he decided he would play YMCA soccer. It's not really soccer, y'all. It's he was a little bitty guy. He could barely walk. The shin guards were going over his knee and over his ankle. He was, that's the kind of situation that was happening. So it was really like amoeba ball. All right, so it was here's a ball, and just a cluster of kids would just run around, and you'd know where the ball is at, just depending on where the cluster of kids were, because they didn't really know what they were doing. And then once, my son, he I guess it just rolled to his feet, and he just, maybe he was walking. I don't know, because he could have cared less. He didn't love it. We were just there because we wanted to try it out. And so he kicks it, and I was like, oh, what's happening? And so then he actually moves with it. I was like, all right, this whole amoeba's right behind you. What are you going to do? So here I am. I'm like, come on. And he looks up, and maybe because he looked at me, and he's like, oh, and he kicks it, and it went into the goal. And I'm throwing my hat, and I'm like, let's go. I mean, it was practice, and there wasn't even a goalie, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter to me because I had a case of the so love my son. I just want good for him. And listen, if I can do that as an earthly father with my limitations and the way that I felt about that, man, there's some people that might can identify that there's a father who loved you like crazy. He loves you so much that he gave his son. We got to celebrate that love, the gift of Jesus who came for us last week. And so here's the kicker for this story. What happens after that? What happens? Actually, this story becomes a cliffhanger. He invites the older brother into the party, but we don't know what happens. And so here's my question to all of us. Are you coming? Are you coming to the party? Are you going to be angry? Are you going to stay away? Are you going to let the fact that you don't understand him enough or you've earned and you haven't gotten everything that you think that you should from the Father, and so you're going to kind of be in this limbo and just not be happy and just stay out? Are you going to recognize that there's more for you to understand about the love of your Father over you? Come to the party. It's time to celebrate, church. It's time for all of us to recognize how incredible the love that your Father is over you. So whether that's salvation for you, you can come to know him for real for the first time, or it's just sanctification for you so you can have a growing knowledge of his love that looks over the things that maybe you've done in your life and is going to overlook the things that are happening in your future because he still loves you. So let's stand up together. I believe there's people who need to respond. This story is for us. I don't know which brother you identify with. I don't know where you see yourself in the story, but I hope that you find your seat at the table because there's a seat for you at the table. It's ready. You just got to go in. You got to respond to the Father, walk back with him, and go and celebrate his love that's over you. Respond, church. There's going to be people on the sides that will pray with you. We are here. Respond how you feel like you need to.